to Two Guys, One Pod, Fantasy Football Podcast. I'm your host, reporter, joined by my co-host, Justin. Justin, we had a Super Bowl, but more importantly, we have some positional recaps to get into. I figure we'll touch on the Super Bowl first, and then we'll get into it. Are you ready?
I was prepared, and then I was delivered, and now I am here. Let's do it.
Let's do it. Let's get into it. Let's start off with that Super Bowl recap, that ass beating that we saw on Sunday. It was glorious, was it not?
It was something. That's something. I mean, if you listen to the old legendary ball knower on Thursday or whenever our episode aired, I told you to take the Eagles money line and Jalen Hurts anytime rushing touchdown or anytime touchdown. I guess it didn't have to be rushing. Just so happened that he rushed it in. So yeah. I mean, I didn't expect for it to get out of hand like that, but it did. It did. I'm sure that there are some people who felt that that was extremely satisfying. Would you agree with that?
As a person who attended a Super Bowl party with my wife, who is a massive Chiefs fan, it was the biggest conundrum because I absolutely hate the Chiefs. I have made no bones about it. But also, in no small ratio, I love my wife a whole lot more. So it was really hard for me to keep all that Chiefs hatred bottled down inside as they were getting absolutely throttled from the jump. Just it was cathartic.
Is that the so like are you having to take us there? Are you having to in real time, like you catch yourself wanting to celebrate and then you're like
So that
man,
first OPI call against AJ Brown, I was just staring daggers at my wife. I was like, see, this is why nobody likes you. And then it was like, oh, the Eagles didn't need that or a whole bunch of other calls to go their way. So I'm just going to shut up now and let the Eagles do the talking, which I feel like the country as a whole was just it was a lot like the election this year. I don't really care who you voted for, what side you're on. You know, I mean, you personally, we talked about this differently, but it's like who we had there, not super galvanizing. Like, I feel like people would have been more excited to watch the Super Bowl instead of just cheering against certain teams if it was like Bills Lions or Vikings Ravens or somewhere along those lines. The vast majority of what I saw around the internet pregame was, can there be an earthquake that swallows both teams? Is there an option where no one wins? I was not cheering for the Eagles as much as I was cheering against the Chiefs, but as soon as I realized the Eagles didn't need me personally to cheer for them or to fight for them against the refs, I just kind of shut up and enjoyed the show.
Yes. The old I told you so.
Oh, no. It was not I told you so, except it was. I'm pretty sure I put that in our group chat. I was like, hey, remember like 10 weeks ago when I said they aren't that good? Okay, yeah, this is that.
I mean, listen, we all knew that the voodoo magic was magicking, and maybe it ran out of steam. Ironically, in the voodoo capital of the United States, I just, you have those things where it's like, this feels kind of inevitable. But the best thing about it is the Eagles were able to avoid, the Eagles were able to give us some epic post game celebrations from their fans. That's the best part about all this is like watching the live reaction of their fans in the street is I feel like that's like an extinction level experience for me. Like that's a bucket list type of thing that I'm trying to get done out here in these streets is just to be in Philly when they win a championship and just watch people pick up like horse manure and try to eat it. Like in real, like I want to see how crazy people get because Philly fans are disgusting as a whole. So this was fantastic. The Chiefs lost. I mean, it kind of sucks because my buddy's little brother's on that team. However, I've also had a following of Jalen Hurts since he was in high school, so that was super cool. And now we're gonna get some amazing quotes from him about like winning and stuff. And that's great. It's good. Love that. Love
Did you
that.
see that? Did you see that the Jordan commercial of Hurts?
Oh, of course I did. Yeah.
Oh, I wonder how
Yeah.
long they were sitting on that. They're like, when the clock strikes 0, the next commercial break is when we want this if they win. And I mean, that
Yeah.
was really. If you haven't watched it yet, Jordan or Jalen Hurts is sponsored by Jordan, even from his days at Oklahoma. And they put out an all-time ad after the Super Bowl. It was fantastic. So, is there anything else? Oh, I wanted to give you props. We had talked about it a little bit before. Before you went on Thursday, I typed up a bit of the show doc for you, but you obviously delivered it like the master that you are. Xavier Worthy. I want to touch on it really quickly. Why I imagine he is going to be a hot button topic for us to speak about in the offseason. 8 of 8 for 157 and 2. We've talked about, or you talked about, I got into the data quite a bit of these year 2 Chiefs wide receivers who have something else about them. Obviously, Tyreek Hill and the skills that he brings to the table, along with his electric speed. Rashee Rice has the kind of speed like a DK Metcalf, like a Deebo Samuel. Like in the short area, maybe not so much, but you give him any kind of speed to get going, and he can make guys miss in the field, and he can accelerate more than what is testable at the combine. And then you get Xavier with electric speed, have a great end to the season, a great Super Bowl by the numbers, and 8 of 8 for 157 and 2 for the game that we play is obviously massively useful. That's a wide receiver 1 week, just about any week on the season. As we go into year 2 and we get what I loved about that play, the second touchdown he had it was old school Pat Mahomes. Like he hit his back foot, look left, look right, chuck it downfield, and it was on the money. It was a bomb deep, put exactly where it needed to be. Let Xavier Worthy be. Like it gave images of Legion of Zoom, and I thought, oh, it's on that one throw. I was like, damn it, we're gonna have to worry about
It's
them for another 3 years.
it's the exact same throw from the preseason. So the throw that made me buy into Mahomes his first year starting was a preseason throw to Tyreek Hill against the Falcons in a dome, just the same way. He hits his back foot and the ball goes about 65 yards in the air and Tyreek Hill just runs underneath it and it's like, "Oh, he can do that." Okay. All right. Well, that's not very many people can do this. So, I think I need to just have this guy on my team just in case he does this 5 or 6 times to Tyreek Hill in particular and we can just profit off this. So, that was good to see and it's going to be terrifying if Patrick Mahomes says enough with the nonsense. We need to chuck bombs and I don't have to finish the rest.
Chuck bombs,
But
make moms. You
yeah,
know what I'm saying?
yeah. Chuck bombs and Zach Wilson moms. Let's get to it.
Let's get to it. We went through the first 10 running backs of our top 24, counting down 24 all the way to the number 1 running back on the season. We will have some discussion at the top 2 spots, beginning with Chuba Hubbard. Chuba Hubbard scores 241 fantasy points on this season. Good enough for 16.1 points per game. He played 15 games, 54 targets, 43 receptions, 171 receiving yards, 1 receiving touchdown, 250 rushing attempts, 1,195 yards, 10 rushing touchdowns, 8 RB1 weeks, 3 RB2 weeks, 2 RB3 weeks, and 2 weeks outside of the top 36. Chuba Hubbard was drafted so late in drafts. He was the forgotten man, and he was somebody that we have spoken of before, even past the regular season. I think that I brought him up in the same vein of a Bucky Irving, of a Chase Brown, the one that you called early on this season. These guys who have somewhat murky situations, like, hey, the projection is they're going to be replaced, or, if an injury happens, this is going to, or the backfield is a little murky right now, it's a split, like something could happen. If something does happen, this person's now a workhorse. Fit Chuba Hubbard this year. This offense was not spectacular until Bama Bryce came back in the second half of the year, and Chuba Hubbard was good throughout the year.
Yes. So not only did he help you get to the playoffs with 8 RB1 weeks, he put you into the championship almost single-handedly with his performance in week 16. So this is a guy that I'm looking at going into 2025, hoping that they add some sort of late round running back, maybe a LaQuint Allen, maybe so just a late round guy to spell him with the touches. But we're looking at another potentially 300 opportunities for Chuba Hubbard in 2025. And he's one of the few running backs I've said before that I would feel comfortable buying during the offseason.
Agreed. We have another offseason for Bryce to work with Dave Canales. We have another offseason for him to work with Xavier Legette, Jalen Coker, whoever else is going to be in this wide receiver room. We have another offseason for Chuba Hubbard to be ingratiated into this offense. We are not most likely going to see Jonathan Brooks in 2025. So, I mean, by all accounts, this is going to be a Chuba Hubbard running back type season. And if he doesn't, they've got to bring in some kind of journeyman running back. Like, I think that somebody like an AJ Dillon type could sign a free agent contract there. And if AJ Dillon signed a contract there, I toss his name out as like a somebody who's going to get a vet min type contract, and it could be any other running back. If somebody coming in is going to get a vet min contract, I don't care who it is, because I'm going to be drafting Chuba Hubbard in the 5th or later every time that I can, because I don't see him getting past that in ADP. I mean, getting drafted above that by ADP, and he's going to represent such an extreme value, a la James Conner of this year.
Absolutely. I mean, that's kind of the name that I had in mind. If you take his per game average and you add another 32 points, which is, his 16, he played 15 games. It's a 17 game season. If you add 32 points, he's all the way up to RB8 or RB7 on the year, right? Just above Kyron Williams at 273 points. So this is a guy that, perfect system. We know that Dave Canales is going to commit touches to the running back position. So he's one of the safest bets in fantasy. And I don't think that people, even though he was excellent this year, will value him in that manner.
At 13, Bucky Irving is the surprise of the season, maybe behind a Chase Brown. 244 fantasy points, 14.4 per game, played all 17, quote unquote. He did leave a couple of those due to injury or had limited snaps in some, but we'll give him all 17. 52 targets, 47 receptions, 392 yards. Let me say that again. 392 receiving yards on 47 receptions. That's insane efficiency at the running back position. 0 receiving touchdowns. 0 receiving touchdowns. 207 rushing attempts. 1,122 rushing yards. 8 rushing touchdowns. 6 RB1 weeks, 6 RB2 weeks, 1 RB3 week, and 4 weeks outside of the top 36. What was the story on Bucky Irving this year? Excuse me.
I mean, this is a natural born football player. So you had people that jumped off the train because he tested poorly at the combine. He ran a 4.65, I believe, or a 4.56. He was 192 pounds. He had a 29.5-inch vertical. The underwear Olympics did Bucky a disservice, but the film guys, the film bros, absolutely did not deter from this. And there were a lot of guys who were just scooping up Bucky Irving. I think that in one of my drafts, a guy was nailing me because no did he? Because I took I forget who I took at the 3.8, but I know I took Kamani Vidal with the 3.8, and the 3.9 he took Bucky Irving. And it ended up working out because the guy traded me Josh down straight up for Kamani Vidal, but I could have just had Bucky Irving, and I would have had him had I not just completely jumped off the train because I thought Rachaad White was a better running back. This is one of the best, most dynamic talents in the NFL. I'm really excited to see how things play out for him in 2025. But there's going to be an increase in usage, snap count, volume. All of those things are like trending up arrows for Bucky Irving. I think that this efficiency is insane. He's one of the first running backs to ever, since Alvin Kamara, to accumulate over 14 or 1,500 yards from scrimmage with just 44% or 50% or less of the snaps. I think the snap rate was exactly 44% for the entire season. Now that's including some light usage early on in the season, but Bucky Irving is a guy that you really that's another guy he feels really, really safe. And unless they add backfield capital, I have no reservation like an early round running back. If they add a second round guy, then I'd have some trepidation. But other than that, nothing is going to steer me away from Bucky Irving in 2025.
All right, let's say I have the 106 in the 2025 draft. Would you trade the 106 for Bucky Irving?
Oh wow. 106 is 106 is Caleb
I tried to
Johnson.
make it pretty steep.
Yeah,
Yeah.
106 is Caleb Johnson. 106 is potentially Tyler Warren. 106 is Cam Ward in a lot of these spots. That's really tough. It would depend on how. No, I couldn't do it. I couldn't do it.
So you would rather have the pick?
Yes, regretfully, yes.
Interesting.
I just with the amount of deep dive I've done into this class as far as running backs and some of the scouting that I've done with Cam Ward and Tyler Warren, and I don't know. I That's
You're
tough.
a big Tyler Warren guy, and I think it's founded. Like I love Tyler Warren as well. Not nearly as much as you. I love him, but there are like the class of this. Like last year, it was wide receivers and offensive linemen, and this year it seems to be defense, especially edge rushers and running backs, is the kind of the high points of this class. And we don't have very many years like this where running backs are really strong. It's not just Genty. It's not just Travion Henderson. It's not just Omari and Hampton. Like your guys who are going to be drafted, late day two guys I think are going to be very valuable. I mean, obviously depending on landing spot, but there's world where the top five backs taken and they maybe middle of the third is where that fifth back lands, maybe back of the third. I'm not sure who you have at five currently, but there's a world where all of those guys are valuable. And the one taken, let's say it's Hampton, or let's say it's Johnson that ends up going to a place like the Chargers or like the Cowboys. That could I fully understand it, but I think that I would lean the Bucky side of that equation just because you're hoping that if Ashton Genty came in and gave you an RB14 season or RB13 season, would you consider that a failure?
Yes.
Okay. Any other running back in this class that they turned in RB13, would you consider that a failure?
No.
Okay, so that's like knowing that all the cards being stacked against Bucky that they were the less than draft capital, the coming in against the strong incumbent Rashad White, who looked better this year than he did last year, in my opinion, by a lot, and missing time due to injury. Bucky still put up this season on limited workload and limited snaps. Like it's what you wanted to see. He's already shown in the best predictor for future his previous success. So that's I don't know. He is what I would want 106 to turn into. So it's kind of a bird in the hand versus maybe one in the bush.
I
But
mean, you're
again, it would depend
asking
on
me.
landing spot. That's where my mind is.
Yeah, you're asking me. The problem is you're asking me right now without being able to see free agency or the draft. Like, if we make it through the draft scot free, yes, I give up the 106 for Bucky Irving. If they add a running back in the second round and I gave up the 106 for Bucky Irving, that's gonna feel hashtag not so good.
Oh, sure. That's yeah, yeah, for sure. I see that. Okay. Okay, I
Yeah.
understand that part of the equation, but we can move on. Anything else? Any other words of praise you want to say about Bucky Irving?
Hashtag that boy good.
Jonathan Taylor confirmed good as well. He actually he put up the same amount of points that Bucky Irving did, just in 3 fewer games because Jonathan Taylor's built like that. 244 points, 17.5 points per game, 14 games played, 31 targets. Ugh. 18 receptions, 136 receiving yards, 1 receiving touchdown. Oh, but wait, there's more. 303 rushing attempts. Again, in 14 games, 303 rushing attempts, 1,431 yards, 11 rushing touchdowns, 6 RB1 weeks, 3 RB2 weeks, 4 RB3 weeks, and 1 week outside of the top 36. Jonathan Taylor was good all year, but he was really good leading up to and in the fantasy playoffs for you. JT, former RB1, what is his outlook for 2025 as Anthony Richardson comes back for this team?
So I've called him Derrick Henry Light, and I think that that's kind of what you'll get. I mean, you got 1,410 touchdowns in 13 games this year, and I believe that that's that's a median outcome. Like you're gonna get more 1,400-yard seasons from a guy like this. I mean, he's capable of 200-yard rushing games and 3 touchdowns, and even though he cost you a chance to advance into the playoff semifinals with that gaff against the Broncos. I think that you're looking at a guy that is locked in for bare minimum 1,308 to 10 touchdowns every single year, and that's quarterback agnostic. If Anthony Richardson gets it together and Stain Steichen, that's what we're gonna call him, Stain
Stain
Steichen.
Steichen. I actually like that.
Yeah.
Stain Steichen.
Old Stain Steichen gets his life together and starts to allow Anthony Richardson to run. We've seen the boost that mobile quarterbacks give to the running game, and that would just make Jonathan Taylor's floor that much higher. So I think that this was about as good of an outcome as you can hope. We thought that the Colts offensive line was going to be really good. It underperformed, and even with that, you got 1,400 yards and 11 touchdowns from Jonathan Taylor. So I don't think that we're making enough about how good Jonathan Taylor is.
Okay, going into 2025, are you drafting Chase Brown or Jonathan Taylor?
Ooh.
I think that silence says it all. Like, these guys that are 6 to 14, I want to include Chuba Hubbard in that. Like your Gibbs, Barkley, Bijan, Henry, Achan, and maybe Kyron if you want to throw him in that group. I would throw Kamara in that group. Those guys are set apart. It's a clear tier break from those guys to the next group. I think that next group is about 6 running backs deep, and that's its own tier. Would you agree or disagree?
Uh, yeah, I mean, I agree. I agree. I think that.
Okay, so
So you asked me if I
go
would
ahead.
take
Go ahead.
Jonathan Taylor or Chase Brown in 2025.
Mhm.
I would have to take Jonathan Taylor.
Interesting. Okay. And would you take him or James Cook?
I would take Jonathan Taylor. The
Interesting.
more
Okay.
that I think about it, the more those are both my guys. You know that. Like I was really, really bullish on James Cook. I've been beating the Chase Brown drum for a long time, but with a guy like Jonathan Taylor, let's not overcomplicate things. He's got the contract. If they draft someone, it's going to be relief for Jonathan Taylor. He's 225 pounds. He runs a 4.3, and you've seen him put up like the best. We just said the best predictor of future success is past success. We've seen this guy finish RB1, and that is a tenable outcome if given just some sort of just reasonable offensive play, and if he's just feeling good that year. So, yeah, I would have to take Jonathan Taylor because his ceiling is somewhere between RB1 to 3, whereas the other guys, we're just happy that we got a top 10 finish. Does that make
Yeah.
sense?
James Conner comes in at RB11. He put up 254 fantasy points, 15.9 points per game, 16 games played, 55 targets, 47 receptions, 414 receiving yards, on 47 receptions. Again, that's a great number. 1 receiving touchdown. That's an outlier low. 236 rushing attempts. 1,094 yards for his second 1,000-yard rushing season in a row. 8 rushing touchdowns, 6 RB1 weeks, 6 RB2 weeks, 2 RB3 weeks, and 2 weeks outside the top 36. We called this from a long ways off. James Conner is really good at football. He gets the extension around, week 10 to 12. I can't remember when exactly that was, but he's going to be here at least one more year. I think after that, his dead cap hit is murky. But, James Conner is another guy. Like, if you wanted to go 0 RB next year and take Chuba, Bucky, and James Conner, I would be down with that strategy. If you wanted to go hero RB and draft some of these guys that we're about to talk about that are going to be definite values moving into next year, I am down with that strategy. It's just good to see our running backs making a comeback, don't you think?
Yeah, the spreadsheet bros. The spreadsheet bros are in shambles over this. The running backs don't matter crew are in absolute shambles over this. They are tearing their garments and gnashing their teeth over the fact that running backs are back, baby. They're like, hey, we're gonna run the ball, we're gonna pound it, and there's nothing you can do about it. And you know what we're gonna do? We're gonna use a factor back to pound it. And that's exactly what James Conner is. We're coming off back-to-back 1,000-yard seasons, the first of his career. I'm sorry. We love James Conner on this show, and we will make no bones about it. I'm super happy that we get to talk about James Conner as one of the best running backs in the NFL at this point, and I still don't feel like he gets that respect. So, going into next year, listen to what Rick said. Like, you're going to be able to get him at a discount because people don't respect what James Conner's putting on the film, and you need to take advantage of that. Like, that's one of the things. Hey, Jeff, make sure you write this down. One of the things to remember is James Conner's going to be undervalued come redraft season and in best ball. So take advantage of that. James Conner. Oh, he's available in the 6th round. Step 2, profit.
End of analysis. Moving on, RB10 on the year, Chase Brown, your guy. Excellent call. 255 total fantasy points. 15.9 points per game, 16 games played, 65 targets, 54 receptions, 360 receiving yards, 4 receiving touchdowns, 229 rushing attempts, 990. One of 3 running backs in the top 10 to have less than 1,000 rushing yards, 7 rushing touchdowns, 8 RB1 weeks, 3 RB2 weeks, 2 RB3 weeks, and 3 weeks outside the top 36. Chase Brown from I think like a week before Zach Moss officially left the lineup for the rest of the season to pretty much the end of the season was just an absolute bell cow. And they said, yeah, we'll bring Khalil Herbert. Wink. Did absolutely nothing for the team. But Chase Brown, he did have the small knee injury at the end of the season. Did he miss week 18?
Yeah,
it was a high ankle sprain. It was an odd.
It's a weird, brother. It was the weirdest. Like
he was trying to go down in bounds, and because he wanted the clock to run. Is that he could have walked in and scored the touchdown, and the game it would have been the same. It would have been like it would have put them up 2 scores with not enough time to score the ball twice. Like he could have avoided the injury very easily, I thought, and just walk in. He had a walk-in touchdown. Yeah, but he tries to stop and yeah, and whenever he stuck his foot in the ground to try to slide, he kind of jammed it almost, and his cleat slid and then stuck hard. It was awful to watch because you were like, that is torn, whatever it is. But somehow he comes back for week 18. He missed week 18.
He should have just pulled that Canuck power.
Canuck power. They put some maple syrup on it, and he was fine. But absolute revelation for the Bengals. They have too many holes, I think, to be able to spend a high capital draft pick on a running back, or especially somebody who's going to actually come in and take a significant piece of the pie away from Chase Brown. They need an offensive line. They need a defense. They need an entire defense. So, of the guys that should feel secure in their workload going into 2025, Chase Brown has got to be in the top 5 or 6.
I agree. I think that there's so much money that the Bengals have to spend. I think spending the draft slotted capital or the draft allotted salary that you have to spend on a day 1 or day 2 pick makes 0 sense for this roster. I think that with them having Chase, or not Chase, but Zach Moss under contract for another year, I think that they're going to re-roll for 2025. They're probably happy with what they got out of the run game. They're gonna throw the ball with Joe Burrow 650 times again, most likely, and I think Chase Brown is a good fit for what they want to do offensively. So my only thing is, are we gonna go revert back to Zach Moss taking 50% of the snaps and the goal line work, or is it Chase Brown workhorse season until he can't stand it anymore? So that's my biggest question there. But I've been pretty bullish on Chase Brown from the start. So I think that this is something that's prescriptive for 2025, but I do have a little bit of fear of the fact that Zach Moss could eat into the workload much like he did at the beginning of the year.
At RB9, Alvin Kamara, 265.3 fantasy points, 19 fantasy points if we round up, 19 fantasy points per game. That's better than the next four running backs in front of him. Could be up there around running back 5 if he plays the entire season. 14 games played, 89 targets in 14 games, 68 receptions, 543 receiving yards, 2 receiving touchdowns. 2 receiving touchdowns on 543 receiving yards is a crazy outlier low. 228 rushing attempts, 950 rushing yards. He's one of those other 3 in the top 10 that does not clear 1,000. 6 rushing touchdowns, 6 RB1 weeks, 7 RB2 weeks, 1 RB3 week, and 0 weeks outside the top 36. Alvin Kamara did not hurt you actively 1 week this season.
No. And that's something to note because I feel like people are going to completely discount what he did and how bad the Saints project to be going into 2025. We had the fade on him coming into 2025. People are like, but look at his explosive runs, and he wasn't very good, and he's on the wrong side of the age cliff, and he's just. You guys, you remember Kendrick Miller? They took him, and he's gonna be the heir apparent. And all Alvin Kamara did to all your nonsense is just be awesome, and he's going to continue to be awesome. He's one of the most unique backs in the league. Has he ever rushed for 1,000 yards? No. Is he going to be a bona fide RB1 on points per game basis? I don't know what that was. But yeah, is he going to be an RB1 on a points per game basis? Absolutely. Lock it in. He's been an RB1 in just total accumulation of stats every year of his career, except for, I believe, this one and then 2022, if I'm not mistaken. So,
no, this year he's an RB1.
oh, he was still an RB1 this year?
He's RB9.
Ooh.
Yeah, and then 2022 he missed that was the suspension year, so he missed
the
either
suspension year was
2 games
was
in the beginning.
2023, and then 2022 was when he sucked, and people thought he was washed because he finished his RB16. But all that said, going into 2025, you're gonna fade Alvin Kamara again, and Alvin Kamara is just gonna do Kamara things. So respect him.
Yes, confirmed. James Cook comes in at RB8, 267 fantasy points, 16.7 points per game on 16 games, 38 targets, 32 receptions, 258 receiving yards, 2 receiving touchdowns, 207 attempts for 1,009 yards, 16 rushing touchdowns. We pointed it out, I don't know how many times in the preseason. Hey guys, 2 rushing touchdowns per year is not going to hold up. A la 16 touchdowns. Here we go. 9 RB1 weeks, 2 RB2 weeks, 3 RB3 weeks, 2 weeks outside the top 36. He does have a bit of a Josh Allen problem when they get around the goal line. There's always the possibility of Josh Allen just being like, I'll do it myself. But aside from those times, and there were a few of those times this year, aside from those times, the running game has been primarily James Cook. The problem is, there were 2 problems. Ray Davis looked good, I thought. And I'm not sure what his counting stats actually were. They weren't significant by any means. He was not a top 36 back. But watching him play the game of football, he looked good. Old man Ray Davis. Ty Johnson looked good in the passing game. Josh Allen even came out and said he's the best pass catching back in the league. And James Cook, even with those two guys looking good and having those accolades from the quarterback, was still RB8 on the year. Fantastic season from James Cook. In moving forward, draft him with confidence.
Let me give you a slant for just some kind of just a little something to think about for 2025. Josh Allen rushed for 12 rushing touchdowns. James Cook rushed for 16 rushing touchdowns this year. They're one of the heaviest run percentage teams, run rate over expectation in the NFL. I think that this could be the better version of Philly's offense, where it's Jalen Hurts and that guy, the running back, just gets whatever's left over. The fortunate part about this is that James Cook can score from anywhere. He has the speed to break one off, to break an explosive run, and that be his fantasy scoring for the day. I got into an argument with somebody in the YouTube comments once because they were like, well, if you take away his 50-yard run, it's like, how can you say take away a 50-yard run? That's yes, that is an outlier, but he's capable of outliers because he has 4.42 speed. And I think that this is something that we need to be mindful of. Just are his touchdowns going to regress slightly? Yes, without question. But that leaves room for him to take more on in the passing game. I believe he only had 32 receptions this year. I believe that
is correct. 32
so.
receptions.
He was labeled as a pass catching back. So we have a floor where he could absolutely give you more in the passing game to offset the natural regression that's going to come from 16 rushing touchdowns when he had 2 in 2023. So, yes, you said draft him with confidence. I'm confident in drafting him.
Yeah. The when the stat bros say, well, if you take away the explosive, it's like, man, you're arguing the data. Well, that's part of the data. It's
Yeah.
how are you? I want you to say what you just said, but differently. Now, if it's like Gus Edwards, one rush for 80 yards, and that's his only one for the last 4 years, I feel fairly confident we could take that out of the data set. But James Cook is not Gus Edwards. So maybe grain of salt it when you're trying to remove pieces of data, guys. But we can move on. Next, we've got Kyren Williams. 272 total points on the year, 17 points per game, 16 games played, 40 targets, 34 receptions, 182 receiving yards, and 2 receiving touchdowns, 316 rushing attempts. He is the first player that we have spoken about in this recap that crossed the triple century mark, 1,299 rushing yards, 14 rushing touchdowns, 6 RB1 weeks, 8 RB2 weeks, 2 RB3 weeks, and 0 weeks outside of the top 36. Were you disappointed in
Absolutely
Kyren Williams
not.
this season?
One, we had a heated debate about he and Blake Corum early in the offseason. And then I pulled a Trojan horse on you and went ahead and just tried to draft him in every single league that we were in because I realized the error in my ways. You were early to the party. I got there, uber black, but I got there. And I think that this is something, this is going to be one of the guys that I think gets extended in the offseason. He's 24 years old. He held up. My biggest question was him holding up to the workload. And not only did he hold up to the workload, he was one of the most reliable workhorse backs. 6 RB1 weeks, 8 RB2 weeks. That means that every single week that he was in your lineup, he put up a season's worth of useful fantasy performance with just the RB1 and RB2 performances. I don't know a more eloquent way to say that. He didn't hurt you. He paid off. This is what you're looking for when you draft an RB1. So I'm thrilled by what I've seen from Kyren, and I'll be even more thrilled once the Rams extend him.
There's not enough room in the first round. I mean, Brock Bowers is going to be
Correct.
drafted up into the first. I would be surprised if
He won't.
CMC falls out of the first by the time that actual draft season rolls around. Then you've got your regular wide receivers, your Justin Jeffersons, your Jamar Chases, your CD Lambs, and then you've got your actual running backs from this year who are fantastic: Bijan, Jahmyr Gibbs, obviously Saquon Barkley, the pride of the position right now. Kyron is looking at being a mid second round pick right now, even with this
Yeah.
season.
Yeah. Would you not want to start off your fantasy draft with a guy like Brock Bowers and then backdoor and be able to get backdoor? If you're in the back end of the first round, you got pick 9 or pick 10 and there's a run on receivers, Puka goes right before you can get your hands on him and you're staring down taking, I don't know, I guess Malik Neighbors with no quarterback, or you could take someone completely safe like Brock Bowers, and then you can go into the second round and take Kyron Williams. Is that something that you would be interested in? Because I think I would.
Well, I think that draft strategies and draft boards are blown right now because it was running backs are the way and there are no other right answers. And you will draft a quarterback late. And now it's like, well, we've gotten pretty good at this. And if you take Josh Allen or Lamar Jackson or Jalen Hurts or X rushing quarterback with also passing upside, like this is going to work out no matter if you draft from the third or the sixth round. Okay, well, wide receivers are infinitely valuable. We're getting better at grading them. We can go 0 RB. We can pick up some value in rounds 5 through 10 and draft highly the Travis Kelce of the world in his prime of his career and draft the CD Lambs and the Tyreek Hills and these fantastic wide receivers. And now those guys had, CD Lamb had a great season. Not for if you drafted him 101, he didn't.
No, no, that's
We're up. And it is going to make draft season crazy this year because you have this crazy amalgamation of different strategies, and I think they all can work. You asked me if I would take Kyron in the second. Sometimes. I am not going to commit to a certain draft strategy this year. I'm going to try to develop the tools and try to identify the rhythm of the drafts that I'm in individually and be able to utilize the reviews that we are doing currently and the different types of tactics that we're going to talk about in the offseason. And I may go Brock Bowers and then Drake London in the second. I may go Jahmyr Gibbs followed up by Kyron Williams in the second. I may go hero RB and take Saquon and then not draft another running back until the 7th round. I may go hero running back and take 3 running backs, and my first wide receiver is Mike Evans in the 4th or 5th. Like, I think all of those could be viable strategies this next year, and I don't know which one is right. So I think that if you are just death hold on to I will utilize this strategy no matter what, I think that is the point of failure, not the specific strategy that you're trying to employ.
yeah. Being married to a strategy is how you come in 11th out of 12 teams. What I was saying is that you want a pick that is safe in those first 2 picks. If you're going to take a swing on a guy with tremendous upside like a Drake London or a Malik Neighbors, I would want to pair them with someone who is simply reliable like Kyron Williams was. I'm not married to a certain player at a certain spot. Actually, yeah, I am.
Okay,
But
we
not in this instance. I was more so speaking on like we're safe. We're safe in that vein.
I agree. I think Kyron was a very safe, very productive pick. I think when we label certain players safe, or they're like, okay, well, there's not much excitement here. Kyron Williams is very exciting, and there is a lot of room for him to go up in his efficiency in my mind. But we can move on to Josh Jacobs, 293.1 fantasy points on the season. Excuse me. 17.2 points per game, 17 games played, all 17, 43 targets, 36 receptions, 342 receiving yards, 1 receiving touchdown. The efficiency in the yardage on those receptions and the inefficiency on the touchdowns in those receptions is wild, but you'll see why. 301 rushing attempts, 1,329 rushing yards, 15 rushing touchdowns, 8 RB 1 week, 6 RB 2 weeks, 2 RB 3 weeks, and 1 week outside of the top 36. Josh Jacobs had a seminal season, fantastic work, but it was a lot on the back of touchdowns past the first 6 games of the season.
Yeah, I think Josh Jacobs is one of the workhorses. I think that going into the year, Matt LaFleur had shown us that he wants to use a committee of running backs prior to this season, but then all of the running backs on their roster died, and so Josh Jacobs was left holding the bag, and he held it quite well. I mean, over 1,600 yards from scrimmage, 16 touchdowns. He gets his first receiving touchdown ever. That was the most receptions by a player in NFL history with no receiving touchdown, by the way. So I think that all the arrows are pointing up. Josh Jacobs is still really young, and he's really, really talented. That Green Bay offensive line is one of the more solid ones in the league, and they have some stability. I know they lost their starting center at some point because of injury during the playoffs. We'll have to look into that and see what they do as far as shoring up that injury if it's something that's long term. But you should be bullish on Josh Jacobs coming into 2025. I don't know that his performance, because there were so many elite performances at the position, will be properly valued for the steady points per game, 17.2 that he was allowed to, that he put out for you on a consistent basis. So Josh Jacobs is another guy that I think will be slightly undervalued. You can get him a little bit later than what his production would normally call for going into drafts.
Josh Jacobs to me is a very Derrick Henry, Jonathan Taylor type running back. When the team is playing with the lead, Josh Jacobs is going to do very well, and he's on a team that profiles to be playing with the lead quite a bit. So, I mean, Josh Jacobs, another, I would say, very safe RB pick, and I would say he's not going to be in the top 2 rounds unless people get hold of the second half of his season and start doing some really crazy projections. But we can move on. Thank you all very much for listening, liking, downloading, subscribing, rating, reviewing, all the fun stuff. You can follow us on socials. We are 2guys1podFF on Instagram, X, formerly known as Twitter, on Blue Sky and TikTok as well. Also on Fantasy Sports Advice Network. Thank you all very much for listening.
Also, download the League Champ app. I am the legendary ball knower at Chev90. You will be able to find us on the Fantasy Sports Advice Network app at Brick316 and at Chev90. So join us over there. We talk ball and stuff happens. So yeah, and you'll see a bunch of my face on the rookie shorts for their rookie guy that they're producing. And always remember, it's Drake London forever, George Pickens also forever. Now we're making an addendum. Have a good night, everybody.